She wasn't loud. She wasn't flashy. Just a simple woman standing quietly at the range while the desert heat shimmered off steel barrels and tired concrete. She moved with a kind of rhythm, deliberate, methodical, like someone who'd been around weapons her entire life. Most didn't notice her at first, just another contractor in scuffed boots and dusty denim. But sometimes, silence carries a story louder than words ever could. And out there, beneath the blistering sun and snapping gunfire, that story was about to unfold. Let me ask you something. Have you ever looked at someone and thought you knew who they were, only to find out you had no idea at all? Because that's what happened the day Ellie Monroe showed up at the range, and a SEAL commander froze in his tracks. Ellie didn't talk much. She didn't smile when she walked in. No loud greetings, no swagger. Just set her gear down at a bench near the far end, eyes on the task at hand. The young guys barely noticed her at first. A couple of them chuckled when she fumbled for a stuck mag. "Civilian," one of them whispered. "Maybe she's supply. Or admin support." Another laughed, tossing a glance her way. "She's probably somebody's wife. Got lost looking for the mess hall." Ellie just kept working, unbothered. Her hands knew what they were doing, the kind of movements that come from habit and history. But the boys weren't paying attention to that. They were watching what they thought was just a quiet woman in an oversized shirt who didn't belong among warriors. They were wrong. It didn't take long for the mockery to pick up steam. One bold recruit, skinny, overconfident, sauntered over and leaned across her bench. "Ma'am, I think the sewing department's that way," he smirked. No response, just the click of a bolt sliding into place. Another voice chimed in. "You know, my mom's pretty handy with tools too." Laughter followed, sharp and careless. Ellie stayed still, didn't blink, didn't flinch, just kept tuning the scope with slow, steady fingers. Someone tossed a rag at her boots. "You're standing on the wrong side of the range, darling." Even the range officer didn't step in, just watched from a distance, arms folded, letting the games play out. But then, something shifted, something small, something they almost missed. She was reaching up for a fresh box of 308 when her left sleeve slipped back. Just an inch, but it was enough. A flash of ink caught the light. A tattoo, dark and intricate, unlike anything the boys had seen before. One of them squinted. "Wait, was that a trident?" The laughter faded. The atmosphere changed like a storm cloud rolling in low and fast. Even the range officer frowned, leaning forward now. It wasn't just a SEAL trident. It was modified when stars, initials, and waves woven into the ink. The kind of marking you don't get unless you've seen combat and lost people in it. One of the instructors, a retired recon Marine, suddenly went quiet. "No way," he muttered. "That's not possible." But before he could finish the thought, the air snapped tighter. The SEAL commander had arrived. Commander Briggs wasn't known for sentiment. Sharp jaw, mirrored sunglasses, always 2 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. When he entered a space, people straightened up without thinking. This time was no different, until his eyes found Ellie, or more specifically, her arm. That tattoo. He stopped walking. Just stopped. Like someone had punched the breath out of him. For a heartbeat, no one noticed. Then the silence grew louder than the gunfire around them. Briggs removed his shades, stared, and said nothing. A slow murmur moved through the range as soldiers and instructors alike tried to make sense of it. Why had the commander, the most hardened man on base, suddenly frozen like he'd seen a ghost? Her name was Ellie Monroe, but back when she wore the uniform, they called her Rook. A nickname born not from chess, but because she moved like one. Straight, fast, never retreating. She was part of a SEAL team operating in covert black zones, where missions weren't logged and names weren't remembered. Years ago, in the mountains of Pakistan, an op went sideways. They were ambushed. Intel had been wrong. She held a rear position for 23 minutes alone, covering retreat while the rest of her unit escaped with critical data. 3 teammates never made it out. She carried one of them half a mile under fire before the weight and blood overwhelmed her. That's why there are 3 initials etched in the waves of her tattoo. Not names, just the letters, because saying them out loud hurts too much. After that mission, Ellie disappeared. No farewell ceremony, no medals. She told the Navy she was done. "I'm tired of surviving," she said, and she meant it. Declined every honor, turned down promotion, walked away. Took work no one looked twice at. Range tech, maintenance, fixing broken things with hands still scarred from war. But she never stopped watching, never stopped honoring the ones who didn't come home. That's why she never corrected the kids at the range. Let them mock her, let them call her names. Because for her, glory was a memory, not a destination. But Commander Briggs, he remembered, because he owed her, and he knew exactly who he just stumbled across. Briggs cleared his throat, then walked directly to her bench. "Chief Monroe?" he asked. The silence that followed was painful. Heads turned, jaws dropped. One of the mocking recruits actually took a step back. Ellie didn't look up right away, just finished what she was doing, then nodded. "Sir?" The young ones around her stood like statues. They were realizing all at once just how badly they'd misjudged the woman in plain boots. "You're Rook," one of them whispered. Another instructor muttered under his breath, "That's the one they wrote that classified training manual about." No one laughed now. There was no room for that, not when living legends stood inches from them, covered in dust and carrying memories too heavy to speak. She didn't give a speech. She didn't rub it in. Ellie just stepped forward and took the rifle they'd been mishandling earlier. In a few smooth motions, she dismantled it, corrected the faults, and reassembled it with perfect precision. Every move spoke louder than 100 lectures. She wasn't showing off. She was showing how. Briggs stood back and watched, his eyes focused not on the rifle, but on her. On the calm, quiet authority of someone who didn't need rank to command respect. The boys watched too, and this time, they didn't see a woman out of place. They saw a warrior who had walked through hell and come back quieter than before. That's when real respect entered the room. You see, real strength doesn't need to shout. It doesn't need decorations or attention. Sometimes it just shows up in the form of a quiet person who refuses to quit. The world is full of ghosts like Ellie, people who served, sacrificed, and then chose silence over celebration. But that silence carries weight. It teaches, it humbles. Out on that range, lessons were learned that no textbook could teach. You never know who you're standing beside. You never know what battles they've already fought. So when you see someone who doesn't speak much, maybe pause before judging, because they just might be someone who changed history and chose not to tell you about it.